What's going on, people? Hope you're all doing good during lockdown 3.0. Now, it's been a very difficult start to the year under the circumstances. I've actually meant to be on holiday right now, which I've since cancelled. So I'm meant to be on a beach, getting a nice suntan, sipping a margarita, but instead I'm just stuck here in my flat. It's a little bit depressing, but I'm sure we are all feeling it at the minute, but we've got to keep smiling, we've got to keep being positive to get through this difficult time. But onwards and upwards onto today's video, where we are talking to Warren Gosling. Now, you may hopefully have seen my previous interview with Warren, property investor, where we discussed his personal journey into property and some of the challenges which he faced along the way as a beginner. Now, this week's video is going to be part 2 of that interview, where we discuss rent to rent as a strategy from a landlord's point of view. Now, before we get into that interview, I just want to encourage you to hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe to my channel to stay up to date on all the latest content. As always, your support is very, very appreciated. Now, without any delay, let's get straight into the interview with Warren. Hope you enjoy it. So kind of moving on to kind of the second part of our discussion around rent to rent, which you mentioned. For those who don't know, is kind of a unique strategy where the investor can kind of benefit from somebody else's property by not actually owning it, and generate a good monthly kind of cash flow. I think it's well documented, the benefits from kind of a property investor actually renting that property from the landlord. But what's the benefit of rent to rent strategy for you as a landlord?
Yeah, I think the number one benefit is the guaranteed rent. So you compare rent to rent to normal buy to let. With normal buy to let, if you don't have a tenant, you're not getting any rent, you're not getting any income. Whereas with rent to rent, if somebody's using your property for rent to rent, they've usually 9 times out of 10 set it up in a way whereby they're paying you rent every month, no matter what, whether it's occupied or not. So I think that's the number one benefit, the financial aspect, but then also the management aspect as well. So when somebody is using your flat for rent to rent, they're managing it day to day. So they're doing, the bookings and the tenant changeovers and all of that kind of stuff. So you don't have to, as a landlord, you don't have to get involved in any of that. So really how it works, and how it did work with me for those wonderful 10 months, was that I just got money every single month and I didn't have to do anything. So yeah, those are the main
Passive income.
Exactly. Yeah.
I can imagine that there's quite a bit of trust which plays a key factor with kind of the investor which you work with. From your experience, is there kind of any process which you underwent to kind of seal the deal with the investor to kind of make sure that they're the right person to kind of take control of your property?
Yeah, I think this is where I learned my lesson, actually, Jamie, because it's a good question. I did mention that, there was a damage, and then also the unpaid rent. So if I did it all over again, I would check the individual. Usually it's done for a company. So if I was at that day one point again, I'd say to the estate agent, okay, what's the name of the company? I'll take it and I'll type it into Companies House Beta, and I'll check the company name. I check the directors. I check whether there are any strikes against the company, and that kind of thing. What I'd also do is, and sorry, let me just explain that a bit more. I think why that's a good thing to do is, if a company's not doing the right thing and they're not managing, their properties well, or if they're just an individual who doesn't handle business well, you'll see, and it's public record, that they've been struck off from companies as directors, or a company might have outstanding court judgments against it. You can see that all. So that's a good thing to check. And also I take a higher deposit, because I mentioned that there was 12,000, oh, God forbid, £1,200 worth of damage, and we only had £825 worth of deposit. So I would take a higher deposit, just because serviced accommodation is a strategy where the property probably does undergo a lot more turnover and damage, just because people are coming out and going in all the time. So I think that warrants a higher deposit. So I do that differently. as well. And then lastly, what I would do is also check that the company is part of client money protection scheme, because I think there are a few regulations around it. And really, if an investor is looking to use a property for serviced accommodations, sorry, if an investor, is looking to use your property for serviced accommodation, they should be part of the client money protection scheme, which basically protects my money. And also that they have insurance, indemnity insurance. So if anything bad happens, any damage, their insurance pays out. So now that I know that, I'll make sure that all of those are ticked before I agree to it in the future.
So I think you mentioned previously about how you kind of fell into service accommodation through kind of the off-plan new development. For someone like me or a company looking for a kind of property to use as a service accommodation or HMO, kind of rent to rent, how do I find people like you who are looking for those opportunities to kind of rent out their property?
Yeah, I mean, I can only speak for myself. Mine came through an estate agent. So what happened was that the investor, i.e. the person in your position, must have talked to the estate agent and said, hey, do you have any new build property developments coming onto your books over the coming months, or do you have any right now? And if so, would the landlord be interested in guaranteed rent? So that's how it worked for me. So it might be a good idea to speak to your local lettings agents, and the benefit for the lettings agent would be that they get a satisfied landlord who is one of their clients as well, who's getting his money each month, and they get their fee out of that. Landlord gets his fee, and then you would keep the difference between that guaranteed rent and the income coming in each month. But then also, it's probably a good idea to target landlords who are a bit tired, who, they might want to be getting out of the whole day-to-day property management of their own property if they're self-managing. So they're always a good demographic to target. In terms of how you actually get in contact with them, I think I've heard that there's a system or a strategy of mailing, so looking up local HMOs in your area. I get the feeling that's been done a lot, so I'm not sure how fruitful that is these days, but I don't know, you might even have better ways to do that than I do, because I've never actually tried it, but that's what I've heard.
I think it's quite a hard sell to kind of mail landlords. I imagine they get quite a lot of kind of requests. So it's kind of a difficult approach, but definitely that is something that I can look into a little bit more in more detail. But my final question is just kind of around advice for me or for a beginner who's kind of considering rent to rent or service accommodation as an investor. Do you think that would be a good way to kind of gain experience, or would you kind of suggest a more traditional strategy such as a buy-to-let as kind of my first step into property?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on what you can afford, right? So if you can afford to buy a house and you got, that deposit saved up, because I think minimum in the UK, if you're going to buy a buy-to-let house, I'm talking about a one bed in an area that's affordable, it's going to cost you about like 30 to 35K by the time you paid for the deposit, lawyer fees, broker fees, all of that kind of stuff. So not everybody, it takes time to build up that amount of money. So in the meantime, absolutely, serviced accommodation is a good way to learn really pretty much all of those core elements of managing a property. So everything from suppliers. So like if we take Airbnbs, whenever we go and stay at an Airbnb, that is basically a serviced accommodation unit. So as the person managing that, you're going to have to make sure it's cleaned. You're going to have to coordinate cleaners. You're going to have to set up the utilities, the internet. You're going to have to do guest booking. You're going to have to take the payments, all of that kind of stuff. And that's great property experience. I don't think really it gets much better than that. And also HMO is very similar because, you've got 5-6 tenants, however many there are in a house at any one time. So it's good experience. So I absolutely do recommend it. The only thing I would say is from a kind of planning perspective. So say, obviously the virus happened really around March last year. So if at the beginning of last year you had 2, 3, 4 service accommodation units that you're doing as rent to rent, suddenly your money's just gone. So what do you do then? Like you still got to pay landlord guaranteed rent, but you got no money coming in. So I would really say if you're going to do it, plan ahead. And we talked about having reserves in place just to cover you for periods such as now, really. So be aware of the risks is what I'm trying to say, as well as the benefits, because the benefits are great. You're going to get loads of money if it goes well, but the risks are basically when it's void, you still have to pay a lot of money to a landlord. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, and do you see kind of the service accommodation market having kind of a massive impact in 2021? Hopefully we kind of seeing the back of kind of COVID-19 and stuff, but do you kind of see it picking up momentum to where we were before the pandemic in this new year?
Yeah, I mean, I think when we talked before this, you said you got a holiday plan that you've had to reschedule, and so do I. So I think once travel restrictions are lifted, people are going to be gagging to travel, to go everywhere. So I think it will come roaring back, definitely. I think kind of like within our culture, like we've kind of shifted, especially us millennials, more towards the serviced accommodation experience. Like hotels are still nice. Everyone loves a nice hotel. But when it comes to like city breaks, most people I know are going via Airbnb. So I don't think it's going away anytime soon. And I think it will come back. And I think if anything, that kind of industry will become more kind of, consolidated and more standardized and more kind of governed. So there might be like, safety standards and all of these kind of rules and regulations. That's what I'm trying to say. I think it'll become more regulated over time, because at the moment, people are kind of doing what they want. But, inevitably with these things, whenever government sees that something's growing, they try and regulate it. So, I'd say it's coming back, but, try and do it really well so that when those regulations do come, you're kind of not having to play catch up and you're already kind of almost there already.
Yeah, fingers crossed, because I think we'll all overdue a holiday. Given
yeah, man. Oh my gosh, I've got to top up my tan.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. Well, thank you, Warren, for taking the time to speak with me. I think that's been really useful. And
Pleasure.
yeah, is there any kind of last words that you want to kind of leave us with before we kind of wrap this up? Do you want to kind of talk a little bit more about what you've got planned for the future? Do you want to talk about any content which is coming out in the next couple of weeks or so?
Yeah, I would say just in terms of last words, I guess just to everyone watching, including yourself, just, really focus on just educating yourself. I think that's basically what's really made me successful in property so far. So that's absolutely a good thing to do. You can never be too educated. And in terms of content, I've got more content. I'm more focusing towards property and stocks and shares investing. That's really what I'm trying to narrow down and niche into. So check out my YouTube, Warren Gosling. Check me out on Instagram at Warren Gosling, just for more content on that. And always I'm always keen to engage with people. So any questions, feel free to hit me up in the DMs and whatnot. So yeah.
Nice one, Warren. Well, thank you, and I guess we'll speak soon. I think you've agreed to being a mentor of mine with that conversation. So you'll be hearing a lot of me in the next couple of years or so.
Pleasure, no problem, man. And when you're rich and famous, don't forget me, yeah.
Never.
Nice
one, Warren. Take care.
Cheers.
Speak soon. Bye bye.